In this video, I'm going to tell you 7 behaviors that are flat out rude at a restaurant, but you might not even realize that you're doing. The restaurant environment comes with a unique set of unwritten rules, and certain things that might not offend in another place will be very off-putting when dining. Sadly, this video was inspired by a recent experience I had while enjoying a lunch on a patio at a local restaurant. A dear friend and I were enjoying a relaxing meal overlooking the river, and I'm sorry to say that the behavior of a man at the table behind us dampened my enjoyment of this meal. I'm not someone who is easily offended, so I know that if these behaviors impacted my experience, they would have ruined the experience for some other people. The first rude behavior you want to avoid at a restaurant is swearing loudly. While enjoying my lunch the other day, the man behind us had a very big mouth. He didn't care if the entire patio heard what he had to say. Unfortunately, what he had to say was punctuated by the F word every 3 seconds, and he spoke exclusively in a very aggressive tone of voice. I'm not normally offended by swearing, but his excessive profanity and bitter tone of voice really ruined the relaxing ambiance of the restaurant. If you speak quietly enough that only people at your table can hear what you're saying, then frankly, I don't care what you say or if you swear. But if you do have a loud voice, and some people naturally do, be aware of this and be sure to be polite in your speech. The next rude behavior that this man did was loudly complain about the service charge. Like many major cities, Chicago has a small service charge that's added onto the bill at restaurants. Most people accept it as a part of dining out in a big city, but this man decided to voice his opinion loudly, not only on the service charge, but on taxes altogether. Fortunately, I left the restaurant before he paid his check, so I don't know if he also complained about the service charge to the waiter. But complaining about the small service charges is ungentlemanly, and it makes others feel uncomfortable at your table. If you live in the city, you should anticipate the service charge and budget it into the cost of your meal. And if you're a tourist, taking aim at local custom is no way to be a welcome visitor. This leads me nicely onto the third rude restaurant behavior, which is not tipping the customary amount. I'll admit to you, I had to learn this the hard way, and I will tell you a story. As you can tell, I'm from the UK, but as of 2022, I've lived in the US. In the UK, tipping is not expected at most places, and if you do want to leave a tip, then around 10% is more than enough. When I moved to the US, I couldn't get my head around giving the waiter 20%, 25% of a $250 meal. One time I was having dinner with an American lady who I knew quite well, and I left a tip of around 10%. It was about $150, I left around $15 to $20. She must have seen what I wrote down because she looked very embarrassed and wanted to hurriedly get out of the restaurant. I realized that for the sake of $15, I had put a sour end to what had otherwise been a wonderful evening. I had totally failed to understand the culture of this new country that I was calling home. And even worse, my choice had impacted the experience of my dining partner. Since then, I have never undertipped my waitstaff, and at places I like to go frequently, I like to overtip. Because the truth is, there is no joy in being a miser, and spreading generosity is the perfect way to end a meal. I understand that in some cultures, toothpicking is not considered rude, but in the US it most certainly is. Do not use a toothpick at the table or anywhere else in the restaurant other than the restroom. I was standing outside a well-known steakhouse in Chicago waiting for my Uber. To my surprise, the man next to me began very proudly picking his teeth with a toothpick while waiting for the valet. If you need to remove something from your teeth, which is perfectly fine, excuse yourself and go to the restroom. But don't subject anyone else at the restaurant, including those at your table, to your disgusting dental display. This next point might be controversial, but I think it is rude to bring children to a restaurant where it's not appropriate. I appreciate that I don't have children, so I don't have to make these decisions, but everyone can understand that certain restaurants cater to families and certain restaurants cater to adults. Although there is rarely a minimum age requirement to get into a restaurant, a parent should be able to decode the menu, the clientele, and the setting to decide whether this is an appropriate place for a family or if they should call the babysitter for the night. As much as I love young children, they aren't always socially ready to be in an environment like an upscale restaurant. The couple next to you who saved up all month for their special anniversary dinner doesn't want to have their evening ruined by a crying baby or a toddler running around. If you want to enjoy a meal out with your family, look for a family-friendly restaurant where it's normal and expected that people will bring young children. The age at which it's appropriate for a child to eat at an adult restaurant really depends on the child, but remember that most children don't enjoy being at restaurants anyway. My parents took me to a lot of restaurants when I was a young child, and although I was well behaved, I was bored stiff. So don't feel guilty about calling the babysitter and enjoying some quality adult time next time you dine out. You might not think it's rude to dress casually at a restaurant, but sometimes it is. So let's talk about dressing appropriately for a meal out. Sadly, at most restaurants in the US, people can dress however they like. And I say sadly because the way that you dress at a restaurant doesn't just impact your experience, but it impacts the experience of others. When you're at a restaurant, bar, casino, or any other venue, you become part of the atmosphere of that place. The way you look is just as important as the way the tables are decorated, the pictures on the walls, and the music that's playing. If you dress too casually for the setting, you are downgrading the experience for everyone else. That's why many places in Europe still enforce dress codes, and I wish more establishments in the US would do the same. Because you have the choice to dress however you want, I hope you choose to dress in a way that adds to the atmosphere of the restaurant rather than detracts from it. It's a show of respect to every other customer there. And if you are inviting guests to join you at a restaurant where looking sharp is expected, let them know beforehand so they don't turn up feeling underdressed. Finally, I have saved what I believe to be the most obvious rude restaurant behavior till last, and that is any type of disgusting behavior like chewing with your mouth open or passing gas. But remember, less obvious behaviors might be considered disgusting in a restaurant setting. That's because people have a much higher disgust sensitivity when they're eating than they would normally. So even something like a buttered bread roll with bite marks left on your plate can be very off-putting. If you'd like to learn more about that and why it matters, you can watch my video on 8 restaurant etiquette mistakes that a gentleman never makes. I hope you've enjoyed today's video on rude restaurant behaviors and it's given you some food for thought. I want you to help your other viewers avoid making any restaurant faux pas by leaving a comment and telling me what is one rude restaurant behavior that you've seen that spoiled the experience for you. I am on a mission to help my generation level up their style, confidence, and etiquette. If that sounds good to you, make sure to check out the video I made all about etiquette in the gym. The gym is a big part of life for many of us, but it presents many opportunities for poor etiquette that can spoil other people's workouts. So be sure to watch that video. Thank you for joining me on today's one, and I'll speak with you all in the comments.